All right. As we continue our Wednesday night series and learning about the great works in the church and around the country, tonight we have another great speaker with another representing another great ministry that is touching lives for Jesus around the world. Mark Woodward comes to us from Fort Worth to speak to us tonight about the Let's Start Talking ministry. Most of you have probably at least heard of that. And we've had a number of students connected with this church that have gone on a Let's Start Talking. Most recent ones that I can remember, I don't like to do names because I leave people out, but Jeffrey Peters went to, I believe, Taiwan with Let's Start Talking. And so doing a great work there, connecting people with Jesus and ministering to them in their communities. And so looking forward to hearing more about that from Mark. And so I'm not going to take up any more of his time, and I'll let him introduce himself a little bit more. He knows himself better than I do. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Well, I'm just delighted to be here, and I really am glad I came on supper night because that was delicious, and I appreciate the invitation there too. I kind of wondered if you knew what you're getting into. I really don't think I know anybody in this congregation at all, and it's a little dangerous to invite people to speak that you don't know very well. Did you know that? Because they might ask you to do something you don't want to do, or who knows what it is there. It kind of reminds me of the story about the father whose daughter, his 16-year-old daughter was getting ready to go out on her first date. Have you heard this story? And she was all upstairs getting all pretty and everything. And, of course, Dad was down sweating bullets because it's his 16-year-old daughter going out on her first date. But she's reassured him it's a good guy. And so, anyway, the time comes, and this guy pulls up in a hot rod painted with flames on the side, and he gets out and he's in leather and chains and tattooed up and long hair, and Dad's looking at this just kind of shaking in his boots. And so he runs upstairs real quick and says, sweetheart, who is this guy? Are you sure about this guy? And she said, well, Dad, how bad can a guy be who's done 500 hours of community service? You got to be careful. You got to be careful, who you go out with here. No, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm eager to tell you about Let's Start Talking Now. We often shorten that down because everybody has trouble saying the whole thing, just like Ryan did a little bit there. And we call it LST. Now be careful, those of you from the 60s, that you don't slip up though, because some people do that and they're talking about their LSD trip, instead of their LST trip, and we want to make sure you know the distinction there. I'm going to pass out these cards, and I'll tell you why. That's because if any of you are interested in having more information about it, all you have to do is put your name on it any time during the service tonight. We got quite a long time. And then hand it back to me at the end. And we'll get back in touch with you and say, how can we help you? What are you interested in doing? And that way, if you feel like there's something you might want to be involved in, because I didn't just come to talk at you, I came to talk with you, and you'll know why in just a minute. So I'm going to pass these around, and thank you. Just take them and pass them back. Now, if this isn't for you, just leave it sitting on the pew there. One, but if you're interested in all, just put your Texas. Let's Start Talking is, I'm going to tell you about myself so that you can understand where Let's Start Talking came from, because where it came from is what we do and how we work, even today. So I think the story of how we kind of got started doing this will be what will give you the most information and it'll be most interesting to you. Okay, so my wife and I, way back in the dark ages, we went to Germany to do mission work, 1971. And the Germans at that time were, and still are, pretty much post-Christian. They've been there and done that, and the only people who really go to church much are, they say you go 3 times in your life: when you're born, when you're married, when you're buried. That's when you go to church. So they were not very open to conversations about Jesus. We stayed there 8 years and actually had a great work, and we loved the people there. But when we came back to the States, we wanted to stay involved with the people in Germany, and so we started thinking about, well, maybe we could take campaign groups. You remember the campaigns that would always go out? Now, we had always had campaigns when we lived there. For the 8 years that we lived in Germany, we had campaign groups come from different Christian colleges. And you know what they did. They sang on the streets, or they stuffed mailboxes, or they did puppet shows. Remember when everybody was doing the puppet shows? And we did that on the streets. So we did a lot of different things. And the whole idea was to get somebody, some of the Germans who saw this, to be attracted to it. And then they would want to come to the gospel meeting we were holding at the church building. And the group would sing or do whatever they did for the first 15 or 20 minutes. And then we had preaching. And so we preached to the people. So we had often, in a 2-week campaign, we would have 30 or 40 visitors who came, but they all came just once. And then most of the time they never came back. And so it was pretty tough there. When we moved back to the States, we started thinking, what could we offer these people that they want? Because they don't want to talk about Jesus very much. So what could we offer them that they want? And we thought, and then it became pretty clear to us, we could help them with their English. Because they're always after us to translate something, or they want to practice their English on us here. So what if we offered to help them with their English? Okay, so that was easy, but we didn't want to just be English teachers. That wasn't what we were about. We were Christians. We wanted to share our faith with them too. And in helping ministries, like when you're feeding people or clothing or painting houses, or all the helping ministries that we're involved with, there's always a little bit of a question mark about how you bridge from doing good in the neighborhood to ever telling them the story of Jesus or talking to them about faith. And that's what we were wrestling with. How do we talk to them about faith? Well, one day I was reading in the Bible. That's a good place to find answers to your questions. Let me just recommend it to you. I was reading in the Bible in the Gospel of John. And at the back of his book, he said, well, Jesus did so many things you can't write them if all you had wrote them in all the books, the whole world wouldn't hold them. But, he said then, and you know this verse, I bet, these things are written so that you remember that verse? These things are written so that you can believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Well, now that seems pretty simple and straightforward. John was writing, and I thought to myself, he didn't know he was writing the Bible when he was writing this. He was just writing to people, for people to read. And he's saying, if you read this book that I'm writing, then you can come to faith that Jesus is the Son of God. Well, that's what we wanted to happen in Germany. We wanted people to come to faith in Jesus. So we thought, what if, while we're helping them with their English, we use the simplified version of the gospel story of Jesus, like the Gospel of Luke. Let's take Luke, because it's full of stories. Okay, so we were going to try this. We took 10 students from Oklahoma Christian, because I started teaching at Oklahoma Christian in 79, and in that next summer, we took 10 students with us back to Germany. And we offered to help people practice their English, put a little ad in the paper. Okay, well, we had 35 people that signed up immediately. And we told them all we were going to be reading out of the Bible. Well, they didn't really like that much, you know. So, and the first day we actually tried opening the Bible with them, and they didn't like that at all. So don't tell anybody, but what we did was we went in that night and we cut the passages out of the Bible that we were going to read with them, and we pasted them on pieces of paper, and we put some questions next to them to kind of turn it into a workbook instead of a Bible. And we photocopied those pages then for people and put them together, and we made this little workbook overnight almost. And we came back the next day and, oh yeah, they would be happy to read that with us, you know. Very same text out of the Bible but just repackaged into a different format there. So it still wasn't easy. You know, the very first words out of their mouth were often, well, thank you for helping me with my English, but I want you to know I don't believe any of this is true. Well, that's kind of a hard place to start, you know, but we decided these things are written so that you can believe. So, okay, John, we're holding to that word. We're believing that that's true. So we started reading with them. And every day they would come, and every day we would read another lesson, another passage of Scripture. And at first they were only interested in English and how to say Nazareth, you know, and hard words like that. But then something really started happening with the people, because after 3 or 4 times that they came, then they started saying, why did Jesus say that? Well, I think that's ridiculous, you know. And they started taking issue with what they were reading there. Okay? You know, that doesn't feel like improvement, but it is, because now they're engaging with the text that they're reading. And then the most interesting thing happened about the 8th or 10th time they came. Then suddenly they said, do you think this is true? And we'd say, yeah. And they'd say, I don't know. I don't know if that's, I really don't think this is true. Then they'd say, why do you think this is true? Okay, now, what have you got? You've got somebody sitting across from you who has just asked you to share your faith with them. Why do you think this is true? And when you told them, you just tell them why you think it's true. Well, I think it's true because, you know, it works in my life, and I think it came from God. Well, they don't understand that very much, but they're listening to you. And you know why they're listening to you? Because they ask you for that bit of information. They wanted to know why you believed. Okay? That is a world difference from the way we often have done personal evangelism or sharing, where we're trying to tell people something they really don't want to hear. If we had tried to tell them why we believed it was true on day one, way back when they were saying, I don't believe any of this is true, they would have just quit coming, is what would have happened. But we didn't. We waited until they started asking questions about what they were reading. And once they start asking questions about what they're reading, then they want to hear your answer. Now, they may not believe it yet just because you say it, but here's the other thing that we found out that summer, that first time we tried this. They really liked us, and because we're nice people, you know, and we were doing something for them that was really helping them. And the more we talked, well, we not only talked about the Gospel of Luke that we were reading, but we also talked about our families, and we talked about, you know, our homes and our marriages, and not big troubles or things like that, but we just shared ourselves with people. And so they started sharing as well. And so we became friends. Very quickly, we became friends with these people. And you know, when a friend tells you something that you disagree with, it's a whole lot different than if it's just a stranger tells you something that you disagree with. So for some of them, what happened, not a lot of them, but for some of them, you could just see the light go on one day as you're sitting there helping them with their English. And suddenly it's just, it's the light bulb right there. It just goes off and you can see it in their eyes and they say, oh, I understand now. You are the way you are because you believe this is true. You're such a nice person and you're showing interest in me and you're doing this because you believe this is true. Well, you know what? They don't say this, but this is what they're thinking. They're thinking, you know, I wish my life were kind of together like you. I wish I were as happy as you are. I wish I had as much peace as you have. Well, maybe if I open up to the possibility that this is true, maybe I will have what you have. Okay. And from that day forward, then, it's a whole different conversation with the people because now they're willing to listen and they're being by God. That's what was that first summer we went. And at the end of the 6 weeks that we were in Germany that year, these 34 people, we didn't have just 34, 35 anymore. We had 50 because they had gone out and brought their friends in. It had not just blown away like our gospel meeting work had done. Now the group had grown because they were getting something that they wanted and they were making friends with us, and this was all positive there. Then they came up to us and said, would you like to we want to give you a banquet. We want to just do something for you because you've given us so much. So they did. They took us out and had a big banquet and celebrated what we was, which said to me, okay, they really like us and they like what we did for them. But the third thing, and this is, I think, probably the most important, the third thing that happened that summer was they said, well, who's going to keep on doing this with us when you leave? And so we were able to say, well, there are Christians that meet right over here and they'll be happy to keep on reading with you these stories of Jesus here. So you can continue on there. We had never seen anything like this in all the years that we had lived in Germany. We had never seen that much response, that much receptivity, that much openness there. And so we said, this is a good thing. This is something God's doing. And let's try it again, see if it continues to work. So we did this for several years in Western Europe. Then the Soviet Union collapsed, you remember, 89, 90, 91. And everybody wanted to go to Russia and Albania and Hungary and all those countries, but nobody knew any of the languages. So they came to us because we had been working in English with the English language for 10 years, and they used our materials. This is that little, remember the workbook we cut up and photocopied? Well, this is the latest version of that. It's still the Gospel of Luke. It still is exactly what we were doing then, with a passage from the easy-to-read version of the Bible, a few words, a few questions. It's still just as simple as it ever was, and it's working all over the world now. After we went into Eastern Europe during the 90s, well, about the same time, some of our former workers, some of the students that had gone with us, they became English teachers in Japan. And that was a challenge. Now, we had worked all over Europe, but Europe was kind of Christian, you know. But Japan is not Christian at all. It has no Christian heritage there. And so we did not know if you could start with the story of Jesus there when you're talking with people in Japan. And the Japanese church, you know, it's a post-World War II church, basically, in Japan, and they were big right after the war, just like in Germany, but they shrank as the people got older. They didn't really grow. So we were invited into the Mito Japan church, but it was about 20 or 25 older people. They had not had anybody become a Christian for 10 years probably before that. And they were so nervous about having Americans come over and help them. They said only 4 Americans, only 4 weeks. They just wanted to keep it contained there. Yeah. Well, those 4 Americans went, and they read with 70 people there who signed up to practice their English using the Bible as a text. When they left after 4 weeks, 50 of those people signed up to continue these Bible studies at this church in English after our team left with the Americans and the English speakers who are in this church. In the first year following that project, 12 people were baptized there. And so Brother Suzuki, who is the preacher for the Mito Church, he says, that's a Japanese miracle. You know, he just couldn't believe it because they had not seen anything like this. So since then, we've been working with about 19 or 20 of the churches in Japan. And from Japan, it went to other places in Asia, like Thailand and Malaysia, Taiwan. In 2000, 2001, 2002, we entered into China for the first time. And that was a little tricky. The first places we went, you know, they were very afraid that they would think this was the Bible. But fortunately, nobody's ever thought it was the Bible, and so, although it is. And so we've had no trouble at all taking our materials into China. And we've been working there in places where people are who have never, ever heard of Jesus. Ever. I'm going to show you something at the end of this evening to kind of verify what I'm just saying there, because it is so hard for us here to even imagine that there's somebody in the world who has never heard of Jesus. But I'm going to show you something a little bit later on about this. And we've gone into Turkey, and I can't wait I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you a little video next here about what a day in the life of a Let's Start Talking worker looks like. And here's why I'm showing you this is a little 4 or 5 minute video, so it's not going to take very long. But you know why I'm showing it to you, don't you? Time to wake up. Because the people who go are people just like you. They're not other people. They're people just like you. So I'm recruiting tonight. I'm not just up here reporting to you. Okay? So I want you to look at this and think, well, maybe I could do that. Okay? Okay, so let's look at a day in the life of a Let's Start Talking worker and see what it looks like today. And short-term missions, that's all about college kids. Well, let me tell you, I thought the same thing for a long. We're a little loud right now. I thought the same thing for a long time. And we only took college students for the first 20 years probably that we're doing Let's Start Talking. But in the last 10 years, I don't even know quite how it got started. But we started figuring out that there are a lot of us who are, you know, hitting retirement age, and we still were healthy, and we were traveling and taking cruises and trips and RVing all over the world and doing all kinds of stuff. And, well, I'm just sure some of these Christians would like to do Let's Start Talking, you know, and take their 2 weeks or 3 weeks and go somewhere and share their faith with people. And we started offering it in churches. And so now, this year, for instance, we're sending out about 350 people all over the world, from Russia to China to South America, Central America, Europe, Italy, you know, all over. We're sending people out. Twice as many adults are going as college students. Okay? Twice as many. So like 200 adults and 100 and some odd college students are going. And it's all kinds of adults. We have whole families who go, like you saw up here, young families who take their kids with them in the summertime. We have grandparents who take their grandchildren and go. We have couples who travel together and go, 2 and 2, you know. We have some couples who go by themselves, because we actually have many places where it works very nicely just for husband and wife to go together and work. We don't work in great big groups. We work in small, intimate little teams like this. So that's why I pass those cards out to you, so you could just start thinking about where you would like to go in the world. Now, while you're thinking, if you're interested, come up and get, I will just pass these Here's our dilemma. How are we doing on time? Oh, we've got lots of time left. Here's our dilemma. Our dilemma is, and it's your dilemma because it's a Christian one. It's a problem for the church. So we're sending out about 125 different groups this year. Okay, these 350 people are divided into about 120 or 125 different groups. And that means we're going to 125 different places around the world. Some places we go to more than once. But we have over 250 invitations for teams. That means that we could send twice as many people. We have missionaries who are asking for help that we have to say, we've searched all over America and we can't find anybody who wants to help you, basically. And that's not something I like to ever say to somebody. So that's why this is not just a reporting conversation between you and me. This is a recruiting trip here. And I really want you to think about what you could do. If you could take a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks and go somewhere, we have a lot of choices. And you can kind of go somewhere where you've always wanted to go, probably. We've got people who want to go to Athens, because now they're kind of messed up over there right now. So I don't know if it's the greatest time to go to Athens, but it's certainly an interesting city. But let me tell you what, once you do it, it's not about where you go, but it's because it's always about the people you're talking to ultimately. And when you get there, you're going to have about 15 people that you work with, that you're going to sit down and you're going to open, and we train you to do this. We have the training on DVD and streaming to you so that you have 9 or 10 sessions of training that you go through before you go. And then when you get off the plane, you know exactly what to do. When you sit down with people and you open up the Gospel of Luke and you start reading with them and you start loving on them and being patient and waiting, you start waiting. You don't start teaching, you start waiting until they start asking questions. And when they start asking questions, then all you have to do is answer from what you understand the Bible to say and for what your faith is. It's one of the simplest ways of sharing the story of Jesus that you'll ever see. And it's natural, and there is none of this sort of, I always called it conversion tension, where you're trying to get somebody to do something they don't want to do, and you're trying to tell them something they don't want to hear, and they're afraid of you, and so you're afraid they're going to throw you out of the house, and that is so far removed from what we do. Did you feel any tension up there on the screen as you were watching these people? No, they loved what they were doing. They loved getting together and coming for these classes every day, and that's exactly what everyone experiences who goes on Let's Start Talking. So we are recruiting all year long, all the time, because people can go any time of the year. It's not just a summer thing. You don't have to miss a single supper here in the summertime, okay? You can come to every supper all summer long, and then you can go somewhere in September, October, when it's not so hot in places in the world, and there aren't so many tourists out there, and it's just a wonderful experience. And I truly, truly, sincerely want to invite you to prayerfully consider this an opportunity, okay? In addition, I want to tell you about one thing maybe two things that have grown out of what we're doing here. The first thing is some of our workers about 1990 started coming back, and they started looking around, and they started actually on a campus. They said, we were just over in Russia reading with people that couldn't speak English very well and telling them about Jesus. And then we got back and we looked around on our campus, and there were all these foreign students who didn't speak English very well and didn't know about Jesus. We thought, well, we just did it in Russia. Why can't we do it at home? And so they said, come train our students to do what we've done overseas, and let's do it here at home. And so thus was born what we call then Friends Speak. Friends Speak. And we have now for 25 years been training churches to organize themselves to look out into their neighborhoods. Do you have people in Clinton who don't speak English very well? Absolutely. Oh, that wasn't nice, was it? Do you know there is nowhere I go all over the country, and it doesn't make any difference how big the community is. It doesn't have to be Dallas, which has 84 different languages spoken in the public school system in Dallas. Okay, it doesn't have to be that. I would wager, without knowing anything about the schools here, that you have dozens of languages represented in the public schools here. And if the kids don't speak English that well, you know their parents don't. Their parents probably don't at all. And so one of the things we do is help churches figure out what could we do. And for the members, it costs them about an hour a week to spend with people, to help them, offer them something they want, English, but share with them something they need, Jesus, So that's something that I want to tell you about, and if the church and if the leaders are interested in talking to us about how we might start something like that, then we would be more than happy to help you get started and reaching out here in your own community. Okay, now we send youth on youth mission trips as well, and we've got a group in Spain right now of 20 young people who are over there sharing their faith. There are an awful lot of our young people, and if you parents and grandparents don't know this, there are a lot of our young people who have never had a conversation about faith. They've done a lot of mission trips, but their mission trips have all been service projects. And service projects are wonderful, and it teaches them a lot, and I'm not saying anything about that, but that house that they painted in 10 years is going to need painting again. And the people, just like with Jesus, the people that Jesus healed, you know what happened to every single one of them? They died. And so while we're out doing good, we need to be teaching our kids, our young people, and our young adults and all how to talk about their faith and share the word with people as well, so that the message gets out there. The number one group in Nepal, the big earthquake in Nepal that happened a couple of months ago, the number one group there that's doing good in the country? It's the Muslim equivalent. It's the Red Crescent. It's the Muslim equivalent of the Red Cross. Christians are not the only ones in the world who do good. On our street, just down from our house, you know who is in charge of cleaning up the streets and everything? The atheists have a big sign talking about what they're doing and the good they're doing in the neighborhood. So there has to be a significant difference between what Christians do and what others do if we're going to continue sharing the story of Jesus, and we've got to start helping our kids know that. And one of the best ways to do them is give them tools to talk about their faith, not just exhibit their faith in their life. Okay, and that's my little sermon for the night. I'm sorry about that. That just kind of came from somewhere here. Now we've got a couple more minutes here, so can I answer anybody's question? Can we talk now? Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh. Yeah, I love that spirit there. I just can't imagine in a church like this that there aren't people that wouldn't help you know how to teach and how to reach out there to the people in your group. But that's the, uh-huh. Mm-hmm. We start with Jesus, let me tell you. We start with the story of Jesus because if you start with Genesis, you know what you're going to talk about on day 2? You're going to get into evolution and science and the Bible and all this, and most people aren't ready to hear that right off the bat. You know, if you start with Jesus, I love this because Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So you want to teach people about God? Show them Jesus first, and they'll learn about God through him. That's our experience over the last 35 years. Yes, sir. You know, not a single person knows the language is usually where we go because people are coming to us to practice their English. So they don't want to talk their own language. They want to talk English with us. And all of our lessons, all of our conversations are only in English. Okay? So language is just absolutely not a barrier to doing this. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes, that's a good question, and I'm so glad you asked it. I have a good friend, Marcus Alexander, and he just got back. He's black. He just got back with his wife, who's also black, from Concepcion, Chile. Okay, they had 20 people that they worked with. They worked themselves to death there, and people loved them. There are countries in the world where it doesn't work so well. I'll be honest with you, you know. But there are plenty of places in the world where a person of any race can go and work. And in some countries, it's so unusual that they become like superstars and are just magnets that pull people. Really, and that's kind of the way it was in Chile there. So that's not a problem, okay? We have tried, and I have been to Vietnam, and we met with some Christians there who are there, but they have to meet so secretly and underground that we could not work there. And that doesn't mean that other people, I know people who are working there, but they have to work very quietly. In fact, where we were, they were paying the hotel, they were meeting in a hotel room, about 30 people in a hotel room, and they had to kind of pay the hotel manager to keep the police away from them, you know. So, yeah. Now, things also change, so I'm not saying that's always the way it's going to be, but when we were there, which was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, that was the condition there. So we have not worked in Vietnam. I would love to. Can you get us in? Yeah. Oh, did he? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yes, that's right. But they are also persecuted. I know several who have been thrown in jail, members of the church in Vietnam. You know, so I don't think they can be very public about it. They are there, like all over the world. There are Christians who are in countries like Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan. And I will tell you, there are opportunities in hard places. About a year ago, my wife and I and another couple went for the first time to the country of Jordan, you know, which is right next door to Israel there. Totally Muslim country, but American friendly. Okay? So, did exactly there what we do in every country. We stood up. There were 50 people in the room. There were women who were covered, you know, just like you would expect in a Muslim country. We stood there and said, we're going to read from the book of Luke, and we're going to be talking about Jesus, Isa, in your Bible, in the Quran, because Jesus is in the Quran. And we did not have one person who said, nope, not having anything to do with that. Every one of those people signed up for it. In fact, what we heard the most common sentence was, oh, I'm so glad we're doing this. I know about Isa from the Quran, but I've never read in the Bible, so I'm very interested in what it says about him in the Bible and what Christians think. Okay, so you can reach out to, in the world that I'm presenting here tonight, you can reach out to the people in your community. Because like I said, there are people here for whom English would be of great benefit, and this is something that they want, so they will come to you, and we don't know, we train you to do it. Yeah, we train you to do this with them, and we have a church in Dallas right now. They have 100 people coming every Wednesday night, before church, during church, and after church, to read with some of their people. 100 people coming every week, all of whom are not Christians. Most of them are Asian, Chinese, Korean, like that. But there are churches all over the country who are doing this. It's just a choice. If you want to invest in the time, it's really not expensive at all. Just invest the time in reaching out to these people. Okay? No. The training for the overseas program, we provide by DVD or through internet streaming, some over the web. There are many different ways, but you can do it here at home. If we're training you to reach out here, do a Friend Speak program, then we often come and train the first group. And then after that, it's your program, and you can continue it on your own then. So, yeah. Everybody raises their own money. For instance, our daughter, who is, how old is she now? 38. And her her two children just went to Brazil, okay, for 2 weeks. Well, it's about a normal price for 2 or 3 weeks is about $3,500 is what it costs, and that covers everything: airfare, visas, food, lodging, just everything that's required of you. Not your spending money, not your, but everything that you have to have, about 35. So that was about a $10,000 deal for the three of them to go, and that's a lot of money. But she put it up on Facebook, and in about 6 or 7 weeks, she raised all of that from family, friends, churches, people want to give to good things. So all kinds of arrangements. We work that out with you, what you need as well as what the church can offer. Okay, and so we work all that out. Some people do stay in hotels, some stay with members, some stay in the church building because they have apartments. There are all kinds of arrangements there. But especially for us who are a little bit older, we know we need a little firmer mattress, or and those kinds of things. We take care of our adult members better than we do college students. Okay, let me just say that. Okay, college students, they can sleep on the floor, but we take care of those of us who are a little older. Yeah. These are great questions. Who else has a question? Wouldn't you like to go to Jordan? Well, let me tell you, it was one of the most wonderful things I've ever done. But here's what I want to leave you, and then I'm going to stop right now. And I want to show you, I promised you this early on, but I want to show you it's a audio clip of a young Chinese woman who confronts the name of Jesus for the very first time in her life. Okay? I just want you to experience it with her. Okay, so Can we have the second video now? Yeah, thank you. Watch fast. So this is the end, and you've got your card. All you have to do is give me your name and contact number, and we'll visit with you and just say, what can we do to help you? You know, what would you be interested in that we could help you with? Thank you so much for inviting me. Please, I'm going to leave these materials up here on the front. Please come down and get them, and I'm not going to take them home, so they'll be here on Sunday. If you're like most churches, it won't get cleaned up overnight. And maybe this is something that God really can put on your heart for here or abroad or wherever. But we're called to be messengers, aren't we? And so we get the greatest pleasure of life is simply doing what we were created to do. That's the greatest joy and the greatest pleasure. Thank you so much. Am I the close here? Does somebody close behind me? Could we have a prayer then and close together? Okay. Father, we love you so much, and we thank you for having mercy on us. Somebody told us about Jesus, whether it's our parents or grandparents or friends or a preacher or somebody did, and we're grateful for that person, but we want to be that person to somebody else. And help us not to be afraid or shy or embarrassed. Just give us courage and boldness, Father, to do what you've made us to do. Thank you for this church, for their loving spirit, for their hospitality, and I ask your special blessing on them that they will be a beacon and a bright light in this community and around the world. Thank you for their leaders, for the ministers, and for all those who share their lives with other people going out from this church. We love you and thank you, Father, for your goodness and your mercy. And we thank you especially for Jesus and pray in his name alone.